I would like to know, first of all, why this story and why tell it now? So, yeah, Annabelle.
Well, I think it's a very important story. Obviously, it was the biggest environmental disaster in the UK. It was the biggest child poisoning in the UK after thalidomide, and it was the first legal case in the world to prove the connection between airborne toxins and damage to unborn children. So, on that basis, it's a huge story. But I think that really what drove me was the fact that no one knew about it. It seemed utterly like we hadn't sort of recognized our own history, that this huge event happened and no one knew, and I felt that we did need to know. When I first heard of the story, it was COVID, and I was sitting on a park bench with my friend who's from Corby, wearing our face masks, and she told me the story, and I just thought, wow, we have not learned anything, So it was very much in that moment, we need to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And for yourself, Jack, why now? Why has it taken off in such a way where someone like me in East London, where I've just binged it on one Sunday afternoon from start to finish? Why did it go off?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question. In terms of why I was attracted to it and why I thought it was an important story to tell, there was two things really. The first was Broken Bones. This amazing company were offering me, and that makes you sit up when you get offered stuff by those amazing people. The second thing was that it fit into something that I was very passionate about, which was disability and the way we have marginalised disabled people and disabled causes in our country for generations. So this is a story about climate change and about the damage that the environment can do to ordinary people. But really, for me, it was about disability more than anything else.
Thank you so much. You've had a look at my cheeky notes there about climate change, because when Kira and I were first both going through the questions, one of my questions was, well, did you think of it as a climate story or did you think of it as a human story? Because as that reel showed, you're watching Bake Off, you're watching Sewing Bee, you don't normally think, oh, I'm watching something about climate because it's so seamless. But yet Toxic Town brings both of those worlds together so beautifully. But I would love to know for you both, is Toxic Town a climate story or a human story or both? And chicken and the egg, which one came first?
For me, when I was told the story, I just thought this is an incredibly compelling story about the human spirit. These women who had been ostracized and ignored and sort of demonized in parts of the community, for them to be united together and bring together and hold on and have that resilience and the courage to take on a big town. And the fact that, later on in the series, you have to, become a sort of a legal drama where you sort of understand how difficult it is to win these cases, cases of environmental contamination and disaster. So there were so many engaging elements that it was the story, but the story happened to be about climate. So it sort of felt organically both. I haven't answered your question.
No, very good answer.
Both.
I think it's about poison and the fact that we've released poison into these people's local atmosphere, and they ingest it through the air that they breathe. There's a bit in the show when the mothers realise that the way that the toxins have got into their system is through the air. It's through this dust, and it's not got any words. Those are always my favourite bits where there's no words involved, and it's just told on the faces of these people as they realise that that thing that we should all be able to trust. The air that we're breathing in was polluted, was destroyed. And as a result of that air being polluted and destroyed, people got hurt, people died. And so it's a localized story about climate. And it's not what we're all experiencing. It happened in Corby, in this specific place. But it is a warning what happens if we don't protect. We are unashamedly a celebration of red tape. We're a celebration of that stuff that politicians sort of delight in going, yes, we're burning red tape, we're destroying this, we're destroying that, so that, you know what I mean? So people can be free. And it's like, well, sometimes protections are important. And I think our show is a celebration of protections and the need for protections.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. we're going to play a clip next, and you said it so beautifully about community and having people around you, because when these issues do, go to court and you think, oh my gosh, I feel so small. One of the beautiful themes that I really enjoyed was the friendship between Susan and Tracy, and the humor. I had a tissue in my hand, and then the other scenes I'm cracking up. But their friendship is beautiful at really communicating the human need for each other, for solidarity. And so this is what happens in episode 2. Let's take a look at this. Early on in the series, and when we know the resolution, when we know the end of the story, it's like, oh, of course they were going to win. But in that moment, you realize, oh, these are two mothers coming together to say, I need your help and I need you to back me as well. And so could you speak to a little bit about that in the art of climate storytelling? Why is it so important to write into these scenes the power of solidarity?
Whoa, okay, that's a big question. I think maybe, I think we're living in a time where we feel sort of slightly hopeless, that we can't really affect anything. And so I think, as well as being a celebration of all the things Jack spoke about, it's also a celebration about, the ability for small groups to, that's a sort of David v. Goliath way, small groups who can come together and affect change. And if your big corporations or your local councils won't listen, then you have to, create enough noise and protest to make them listen. And so I think I think it's about hope and faith. And, you just always hope that there will be people who, well, I suppose because there's a shared experience here, these mothers have all suffered untold pain and their lives will forever be affected. And they are united in that pain and suffering and injustice and sense of denial. And they were lucky enough that there were other people good people doing the right thing, whether it was a local councillor or an engineer who became a whistleblower or, a local journalist. There are enough good people around who will help you, and I find that one of the most positive things and uplifting things about the show.
And just on that moment of the aspect of faith, there's a proverb that says the simple will shame the wise, in the sense that you're rooting for this underdog. You've got that simple, but all of these powers that be, but it's these people who win. Jack, is that fun to write? Is that fun to bring to the screen?
This whole show was terrifying to write from start to finish because it was a true life story, and because you were dealing with people that have been through a tremendous amount of pain and you didn't want to kick them any more than they'd already been kicked. And so doing this show, and the level of detail we had to go in, and the legal lines we had to walk whilst protecting our story, whilst also not opening ourselves up to defamation, and all those sorts of things that we had to do, made it a very, very complicated story to write. What made it a joy to write was the women at the centre of it. Everyone should meet the real life Susan. You wouldn't be disappointed. Tracy, Maggie, Maggie and Derek, the one of the central couples. We went round their house for tea. She cooked us a lasagna. Do you know what I mean? And getting to know them and having them tell their stories to us, and finding all the different ways that their humanity bled through was a true joy.
Just an off-script question. Was there anything over a dinner, over a lasagna, that actually made the final cut? Was there any lines that you thought, I'm going to pinch that? That's pretty good.
I mean, Derek would do anything that Maggie asked him to do. And he is the nicest, sweetest man in the world. But watching this man hurry around after this woman that he adored, I think, was the central thing of it. He also drove us around all the sites. I mean, this guy, of all the people whose stories we put on screen, Derek probably had the hardest of all, because he was a driver. He was part of the contamination. He did not give evidence in court. He was very wary about giving evidence and was trying to protect his family by not giving evidence. But he was put in an almost impossible situation by this case, and he said, yeah, tell my story. In fact, he went, I'll show you how this story can be told, and I'll take you to these sites. And Derek is in the film too. He's in episode 1. He's the guy that sends Derek, the character Derek, on his way with a clipboard. So
because he knew which road to go.
Yes.
Yeah. He's like, what, you go down there, turn left.
I told I'm going to get the tea, you know. I'm going to get all of the tea from these guys. And on that point about voices and the different people you spoke to, there's a lot of voices in the show. And so there's a scene where all of these voices do come together in episode 3, and it gets quite heated. And for those of us who have campaigns and have passion projects where we can also get heated, we may understand the level of emotion that we're about to see in this clip from episode 3.
When we did one of these and Susan was there and she was sat in the front row, well, am I allowed to say you're looking at me like... She was literally heckling us while we were trying to do answers. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say the other thing.
We need a bloopers cut. Do you have any bloopers of any? We need like an unreleased bloopers tape of all the behind the scenes. So you've got lawyers, you've got ordinary people, you've got scientists, you've got people in policy making, you've got so many different voices. How did you write them and balance out the voices so one didn't overshadow another?
Well, the decision we made right at the beginning was that this was the mother's story. So one of the things we delayed, and it's amazing that Rory Kinnear signed on to play the role, but we had to delay Des, the lawyer's entrance, until the end of episode 2. That's a long time to delay the legal story starting, but we felt if we didn't start it emotionally, if we didn't make it about their discovery process rather than a legal discovery process, we were doing them wrong. And so, yeah, and that meant that the legal process had to be slightly squeezed to tell a very complicated story, but our whole story was squeezed. It took place over 13 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's very complicated to tell a story in that amount of time. But yeah, we decided to be emotionally led, and that meant that Susan was the one that started us, that took us through, and then Tracy and Maggie folded in afterwards, and they were our lights as we were working our way through the story.
We tried to show the tapestry of Corby as well in that first episode, yes. Like through the mothers and through the political manoeuvrings of the council, because you know the whole situation has come about. It wasn't a simple, you know, small people against a big multinational and invisible face of a corporation. It was the town. You know, the whole town was involved. It was a Labour-led council run by ex-steelworkers, the people in the subcontracting companies, the actual reclamation workers. They were all ex-steelworkers, all wanting employment and all wanting a sense of hope and identity against the mothers who were supportive of all of that, of course, because we all need, we all need money to survive. But they were like, but we're a voice against them saying we think something is wrong, and no one wanted to hear.
And how important is it to also include all of those voices to maybe just build the world of the story? Because until you get a sense of the people who they're fighting, it's no use to just leave them out of the story. You must include them. So how was that to include, and how did you tread carefully around that as well?
Yeah, I think the important thing, and that's what Annabel, I think, was same was that, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, that this wasn't a black and white case. This was a case of glorious shades of grey. And so we needed to make sure that you understood Roy, you understood the relationship between Sam and Roy, and you set up these relationships that hopefully, through their complication, took you inside the complication of the case.
Don't we just love it when there's conflict in between both camps? You're like, oh, we're rooting for you, but also I understand why you can't be team on both sides.
A few days and a few weeks after the show went out, a new campaign was launched to try and get a public inquiry back into the case, because lots of factions believe that the true story is not known. There is a campaign group that the mothers are helping at the moment, helping mothers whose children have cancer, and there's a high incidence of child cancer in Corby. I think in one street there's 7 young children, and in one school in one year there are 4 children. It's just ridiculously high, and sadly it has all the echoes of Toxic Town, which is incredibly depressing. So yes, it's galvanized lots of the individuals and families within Corby, and then on a wider level, we hear about lots of communities who feel that they've experienced similar things but haven't been able to to get any credence or, get any mobilizing of people to help their cause. Because as we know in these cases, it is so difficult to prove. The historic data is not there, the evidence is not there. Group litigation is an absolute nightmare and incredibly difficult to fund. You as a lawyer will appreciate that. So it's so rare that these cases ever get won. So I'm just so proud that with the power of Netflix to reach such a wide audience, now people are beginning to sort of point to Toxic Town as a reference to say, this is happening here. And giving them that language and sense of empowerment is just one of the most gratifying things about the show.
Yes, normally my instinct is to write something and hide, and I'm trying desperately to not do that. I did Question Time last week. I can tell you it was horrible. But it was interesting to do, and then you do it, and then, if you've got 5 minutes and you want to laugh, put my name into Twitter and see the amount of abuse you get for just saying something. And that's why these MPs are amazing. I know we're very hard on our political leadership, but these people that just stand up and constantly are putting themselves in this spotlight, I think are incredible. So I felt that it was important to talk and be out there. I am looking forward to retreating back to my little hole, and I have so much respect for the people that don't retreat back, that constantly are putting themselves forward and talking and making themselves known. Uh, I, I, I think it is our responsibility, and I think we are working out how to do it, and trying to adapt ourselves to different means of doing it. I also think there's a tendency within our profession to panic and to say that we've lost these people and that they never come back. And my experience of adolescence and going into schools is that actually they have watched it and they do want to talk about it, and having those conversations afterwards, and those conversations become a wave. And my experience of making television is, I think we've changed how we work a tiny bit. That it used to be that everyone would talk about Minder, right, in school the next day or whatever. The chief, Tim Pickett-Smith is the chief. But now there we are, references to the golden age of television. But now that's changed a bit. But it doesn't mean that we still can't provoke change. I mean, the show that in my lifetime that I think has provoked the most change is I May Destroy You, Michaela's show, which had a sizable audience on the BBC, but it was the fact that by doing that and telling that story so boldly and with that vocabulary that she told it, it provoked other storytelling, and that storytelling found its way onto YouTube, found its way onto TikTok, found its way into all these devices. So you know what I mean? Like, she started a revolution, and it wasn't about getting Minder level numbers. It was about provoking other people to follow in her wake.
Do you work in trouser design? Is that right? I like your question. I wasn't expecting it. Derek, when we were having lasagna with him and Maggie, I think because they were so lovely and shared everything with us, this was one of the key visuals that they talked about, this idea. He'd come back, he'd be on the trucks, he'd come back, and Maggie would make him take his, because she's very house proud in a very sweet way. So she was like, "You are not coming in here," and so he would have to take them off, and she'd be humiliating him at the doorstep, and so it was a real fact. We had a huge lots of conversations about responsibility to contributors, and that was very much, the foremost of my mind as the TV producer, making sure that we respected the story, respected the families that helped us. But we were. This is a factual drama, and we were telling that story. We weren't. It wasn't. We didn't have with Netflix a sort of campaign on how we were going to bring about change, because it's us to tell that story and for people to react to it.
Because I sort of read into it, how do we make more of this stuff? Is that sort of what you're saying? And with other people, it's something I worry about a lot, right? Which is just the next generation of writers and what they're being asked to do and how small TV's got in terms of the stories that people feel like they can tell within it. The propensity of every story to be a detective drama is a problem right now, and I think that TV's lost its confidence a tiny bit in attracting audience. And one thing we were aware of with this was we were a test case. We were a test case for whether this sort of social realism can work on Netflix, and I hope we proved that it can. And I hope that means that other commissioners are empowered to tell more of these sorts of stories. And the mad success of the Post Office, I think, points to the fact that audiences are hungry for this stuff if we give them the opportunity to have these stories on their television. But it does require TV to get a bit more courageous. And I know that's something the Writers Guild are encouraging, and I hope that they keep encouraging it, because I want the next Jimmy McGovern, the next Michaela Cole, the next Sally Wainwright. You know what I mean? Like, these next people coming through, so that these stories are being elevated by a new generation. The interesting thing is we didn't need to make too much up where Susan was concerned. She was as wild as she is, and and there were, there's a moment when they go and collect toxic waste from a site. Susan just did that. That's what she did, because that's how she's built. So there wasn't a need to inflate too much of the history, and there was so much in the story already that had the potential for dramatization within it. And that's often the case, I think, with real life stories, that once you look into them, you see these turns and you go, oh my God, I wouldn't have written that if I'd been fictionalizing this from the start. But now that I'm given that gift, that's amazing. The biggest example I can give of that is Tracy being excluded from the case. And that's the reason why Tracy, we had to go through a process of choosing which mothers we were going to give the light, and I tell you, that was one of the worst processes of this whole thing, and there are people that have been excluded from our story because of that. But Tracy was given the light because this amazing thing happened to her, this horrible thing happened to her, and then she was denied the opportunity of justice while her friends were getting justice. That's the sort of that's both a horrible thing to hear and a true gift to me when trying to craft a narrative. There was some creative license. There wasn't that much needed. I'm trying to think where the creative license was. There is a character in the show who appears to be fictional. I can tell you, actually, he's based on someone quite specific. There's other characters in the show who were conflations of a whole lot of... because the council over 13 years changed so rapidly, we did create some characters to be the sort of stability through that, but we tried to tell the truth of those characters in terms of what decisions the council was making during that time.
So many questions, and I'm sorry we haven't got time for all of them, but my last question has to really end on the art of climate storytelling. So before we play this next clip, just a quick fun fact. Which one was your favourite episode of Toxic Town? Real quick, Annabelle.
I can't possibly say that.
Episode 4.
I can't. Maybe
Jack's like, I'm certain he's got one.
4.
Because it's over. Yeah, he's like, oh my God, I'm out of here.
Well, that's just good, because we've got a clip next from episode 4. Let's have a look. Still get goosebumps. I love a justice story. I love a climate story when you don't know you're watching a climate story. So the art of climate storytelling, what is the key to telling it really well, first of all, and when does it fall flat? But let's talk about when it works really, really well. To kick us off, Annabel.
I think to your point, when you don't quite know it's a climate story, you know, you're just like, I'm loving this, I'm loving these characters, they're intriguing me, I'm engaged, I'm really enjoying this, where's the story going? I think if you're in that space, then I think you're onto a good thing.
Nice. And for yourself, Jack?
I can talk about the failure bit.
Yeah, okay, go on.
So just down the road is the National Theatre. There was 4 writers who were brought together to write a play about climate change. We wrote this play called Greenland, and it is one of the worst reviewed plays in the history of the National Theatre. So yes, I've seen the dark side. And it was quite something. I think it's almost impossible to tell these sorts of stories. I thought your short was beautiful in terms of how it found a way to do that. It's impossible because the polemic is not something that is suited to television, that you want to sit on a question rather than an answer, and when you're going towards an answer which is you have destroyed the world, it is very difficult to illustrate that in a way that feels like you're being brought inside something. You feel like you're being lectured towards something, and I think every writer that's trying to do it has my full respect. I'm running hard in the other direction. I keep being pulled back towards it, but I think it's a really, really complicated thing to do, and I think any writers here that's trying to do it, please keep trying, because it is when it works, it's wonderful.
It truly is wonderful. And just to encourage you both, like you both said it at the beginning, starting with Susan's story and starting with the human story, and you know, you're immediately sucked into their worlds. And so thank you so much for being pulled back into this direction. We needed you both to do that so that we can get a fabulous show called Toxic Town. Can we make some noise for my incredible special guests? The incredible Annabel Jones and Jack Thorne.